You know, I personally believe that nobody should be president over the age of 70. As you know, it was Donald Trump's birthday yesterday. I'm sure Melania Trump jumped out of a cake for his birthday present, I'm sure. But both of these men are in their 70s, and they're not young. I don't want presidents to be over 70. I don't want presidents to be in their early 20s either. That's why we have rules as far as that goes. I think 30 to 70 is a fair age. I would actually argue maybe even 30 to 60. But Donald Trump, the reason why we're talking about age is because both have had some blunders as of recently. Trump was speaking at the West Point grads over the weekend, repeatedly had trouble with General Douglas MacArthur's name, calling him MacArthur. Have a listen to this.
Be as bold and determined as the immortal General Douglas MacArthur, who knew that the American soldier never ever quits. After leaving the Philippines for Australia at a low point of the Pacific War in 1942, MacArthur famously vowed, "I shall return."
By the way, in the video, the guy had trouble even picking up a glass of water. It was weird. It was really weird. You got to check out that video. It's odd.
Just laugh about Donald Trump because you think he had a stroke. That's great, Brian. You show so much empathy for those who are stroke victims. The empathy.
Let me be
all I can think about when you talk about Donald Trump in those situations is how empathetic you are for his mental problems, assuming that he has.
So let me be very clear when it comes to empathy. I don't empathize for horrible, racist human beings. So let's just clear that up right now.
Okay.
I tend to not feel empathy for horrible people.
But you empathize for George Floyd, who took a gun and held it to a pregnant woman's stomach while her house was robbed.
That
makes sense.
I don't know if you were here last week. Maybe your brain wasn't here.
I was totally here for that conversation.
So maybe you might have forgotten this, but I did 2 hours talking about George Floyd and his past.
We did.
Okay, so I have no idea what you're talking about. Nothing to do with what we're talking about now with Donald Trump. I don't empathize for George Floyd. I don't empathize for Donald Trump. Both bad people, okay? In the George Floyd situation, I empathize for his family.
You think Donald Trump is as bad of a person as George Floyd?
You're the one who brought up George Floyd in this conversation, not me. I don't want to talk about George Floyd for whatever ridiculous reason you brought up George Floyd.
I'm just talking about empathy.
Okay, well, okay.
Because that's the
Fine.
word. That's the
Fine.
word of the day.
I care about people. I care about officers. Just like, I went to the Officer Shea thing because I have empathy for him. I went to his fundraiser. Were you there? I was there. I do have empathy for people, just as I have empathy for many of the good people in the Black Lives Matter movement. Good people in that movement who want to be treated as equals. I have empathy for both sides of the aisle. I don't have empathy for bad people. I can name you plenty of Democrats I don't have empathy for, and I don't have empathy for Donald Trump. I tend to not have empathy for those who don't have empathy for others. Donald Trump doesn't. But anyway, going back to what Donald Trump said and the way he acted at West Point. Then he drinks this cup of water. He struggled to even put it up to his lips. It was very bizarre. Yeah, it was really weird. He puts a finger underneath it. That was strange. And then he's walking off the stage, and he's walking like a 95-year-old man, like very, very ginger. And people that were on the stage said it wasn't slippery, and he claimed it was. And it was very bizarre. There's something not right with Donald Trump. I'm not a doctor. There's something right. Now, Joe Biden, to be fair, last week, repeated himself 3 times in less than a minute, and I think it's fair to point that out. So let's have a listen to this.
The act of protesting should never be allowed to overshadow the reason for the protest. The act of protesting should never be allowed to overshadow the reason for the protest in the first place. And what I worry about tomorrow night in Wilmington, for example, there's a lot of really good people. I'm going to be I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be up in Pennsylvania. But tomorrow night, what I worry a little bit about is you and many others are going to be out there protesting legitimately for change. But we can't allow the protesting to overshadow the purpose of the protest.
Okay, so there's no reason to repeat yourself 3 times in 45 seconds. And again, the bottom line is, and this has nothing.
It wasn't even the worst bit of that one.
This has nothing to do with being a Democrat or
way worse,
okay, with a lot of people on the right. They want to go after Joe Biden and say he's old and senile. For people on the left, they want to go after Donald Trump all the time and say he's not healthy. Again, it's another perfect example of people playing amongst their political party And I'll say it again. I don't care whether there's an R or a D next to your name. I don't care. I don't think you should be allowed to be president over the age of 70. There's age requirements where you can't be a certain age. You can't be, in your 20s. Well, why can't we have age requirements? What's next? If you're 90 years old, you can run for president? It makes no sense to me. These men are in their 70s. Clearly, their mind doesn't work as it did 20 or 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. Clearly. I think that's very evident. And listen, Donald Trump is not, he's obese. He's not morbidly obese, but he's obese. I disagree with Nancy Pelosi's characterization, but he is obese.
He's barely obese,
okay.
Brian.
He's not in good shape.
By 0.1.
You tell
on the
me
BMI scale.
that when you saw him
barely obese.
You tell me that when you're right. He's on the front of Fitness magazine.
I'm not saying that.
You
I'm just
tell
saying
me,
he's not.
Okay.
He's not even consistently obese. He's just on the verge of barely being obese.
But he is, and that's what I said. It's factually accurate. You tell me, and you could convince me that when you saw him walking off that stage over the weekend, that you think this man is in good health.
Well, let's keep on. He stood up there for 2 hours before that. There was no railing there, and he made a statement, and he said, there was no railing, Brian. And as he walked off, he was walking off fine. It wasn't an issue. I believe it was probably slippery at that particular point. I just had to gaff. Am I losing my mind too? Do I have are my mental faculties taken away from me despite the fact that I'm 34 years old?
I think they are. Yes.
He stood up there for 2 hours, Brian, and gave a very, very good speech. He said MacArthur because he's MacArthur. I messed it up too. I mean, that is the weakest gaff I've ever heard in the history of gaffes. We've done a lot of them. That's the weakest one I've ever heard. MacArthur. How do you call that a legitimate gaff and then question his mental acuity for that particular situation, Brian?
All right, well,
but he walked down the stairs and there was no railing. And had he fallen, do you know how big of an outcry there would have been, or how much guff he would have gotten for doing that? It would have been crazy. So I don't blame him for walking gingerly down that particular ramp, and I don't think that it has any bearing on his mental capabilities or lack thereof at this point.
Folks, that's exactly it. JD made my point for me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Here I am agreeing that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are probably too old to be the leader of the free world. They're not healthy. They're certainly not mentally as healthy as they were maybe even 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Joe Biden is significantly
if I could just finish.
Less mentally healthy than Donald Trump is.
If I could just finish. Here's a perfect example of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, both not in good, healthy mental or physical condition. That's just a fact. I mean, anybody, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I don't care where you're from, where you're at as far as political party, they're both old. They're both not in the state of mind, physically, mentally, in my personal opinion, to be the leader of the free world. And I'm willing to say that on both sides of the aisle because I think that's
you're trying to equate Donald Trump with. I mean, Joe Biden is. It's literally elderly abuse at this point, Brian.
All right,
he has no business being up there.
That's absurd.
Donald Trump talks to the media and the public on a very consistent basis.
He does a great job of that.
You're trying to say that Joe Biden. It's constant whataboutism. Joe Biden is not
whataboutism when you take both of them, JD.
No, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
You have no idea what that word means.
You're trying to put up Donald Trump to Joe Biden's level, and it's not even close to the same thing.
Of course, because you're a Trump supporting where the Donald Trump
has nothing to do with it. You actually think that Donald Trump has the same mental problems as Joe Biden does at this point?
First of all, you're not
you actually believe that. Based on what you've seen.
Okay, so
Joe Biden can't finish a sentence at the time, Brian.
Let me know when I can answer your question. First of all, I never said that. Once again, you're putting words in my mouth.
Well, I'm asking you now.
Okay, so I'm going to state what I said again for the third time. I have to do it constantly with you because you're not listening to me.
No, you don't. I'm listening to what you're saying, Brian.
Both of them. It's not about whataboutism. No. When you take what both people, the president did and what Joe Biden did over the weekend, we're taking both cuts of audio. That is not the definition of whataboutism. That's number one. So you were wrong on that. Number two, I'm taking both of them, and I'm not saying one health is worse than the other.
Well, you should say that.
If I could finish.
That's my question to you.
Okay, if I could finish. And don't tell me what I should say. I'm going to say what I feel.
I'm going to ask you that.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to do what you want.
You're not going to answer it.
I will answer it if you can stop interrupting me, which you've done the entire show. Okay? Donald Trump and Joe Biden are both not healthy enough mentally or physically, in my personal opinion, to be the leader of the free world. I'm not going to do a compare contrast and say, well, I think his mental acuity is better than his mental. I'm not going to do that. I'm simply not going to do that.
So I'm asking the question. Who has deteriorated more mentally, Donald Trump or Joe Biden?
I am not
based on what you've seen.
I am not a doctor. I don't know.
Well, one could argue Trump's tweets are a sign of mental illness. the things that he says over Twitter, the conspiracy theories that he retweets, some might say that is a sign that he's not well.
Those were not conspiracy theories. He's just saying, based on what I've seen, and I said the exact same thing, based on what I've seen in the video, I believe that there should be questions asked. He said the exact same thing about Joe Scarborough.
Well, let's ask Kofifi.
That isn't mental. Asking questions like that is not a sign of mental illness.
All right. Well, again,
Linda on the line.
Again, you're a Trump supporter. I'm not. I'm not a Biden supporter. I don't support either candidate right now, and I'm able to look at both situations and not defend either of them. Clearly, you're not capable of doing that. But
because
you're right.
Joe Biden has deteriorated significantly worse now. Is Donald Trump the same person he was at 50 or at 73 than he was at 52? Of course not. But he is still in a fine position mentally and physically to be able to lead the country.
I can't believe.
You know what his resting heart rate was at his last physical? Sorry, it was 63.
He did have that mysterious doctor's visit.
Yeah, I wonder what that was all about. It was just a normal physical.
He can't go to the doctor?
No, there were questions.
So if you go to the doctor, you can't be president of the United States.
No. There was questions about why he was taking a physical right then and there, and it wasn't on the calendar or on a schedule. And
well, my opinion won't change, folks.
That was speculation.
I'm not going to be biased on either end. I'm going to say they're both not fit to be president.